All right, back in the shop. What are we doing today? That's funny you ask, because I'm about to tell you. So, ordered some stuff, got some stuff in the mail. Let's check it out. First of all, we got our set of lowering springs, Ford springs. These are the K springs, so it's the 1.5-inch drop. And then we got us here some Maximum Motorsports camber plates, and then we got some of the Ford bump stops. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and throw all this stuff on and get rid of this 4x4 look that we got going on here. It looks terrible. So I'm gonna go ahead and get to work on that. All right, so starting out, we are going to replace the rear springs first. We're not doing the shocks. I would love to do the shocks, but unfortunately I'm only one man, so that's not on the cards today. So first of all, we're gonna go ahead and pull the sway bar in link, or at least unbolt it at the top, unbolt the shock, or put the tranny jack under the rear end, drop it down a little bit, and then go ahead and pull the springs out. And then we probably will have to pull the wheel off to replace the bump stop up there. So go ahead and do the springs first. All right, so I got the sway bar disconnected, got the wheels off, got the lower shock bolt out. Rear end is suspended, or it's sitting on the trans jack at the moment. So I should just be able to drop the trans jack down, and those springs should pop right out. So I'm just gonna slowly start going down with the jack. Just get the tension off of the springs. So you don't want to go too fast here and just have the springs just jump out at you. It's not gonna be a very good day for you. So going out, you can see how far the axles dropped so far. There's some pretty long springs, honestly. See? Look at that. No tension. All right, so this should come out of here. I'm gonna need both hands for this. All right, I got the new springs. Here's one of the new springs next to the old springs. You can see it's just a little bit shorter. So they're only supposed to be an 1.5-inch drop, but it's probably going to lower it. It's a progressive spring. So what that means is it has multiple spring rates. See how the coils, are tighter together here, and then they farther apart here. So that's going to change your spring rate. So with a small amount of suspension travel, it's probably a relatively soft spring rate. And then the more the suspension travels, it's going to get stiffer. So that's where you get the progressive rate rather than a linear rate spring, which is going to be basically, you'll have the same coils all the way through. So it's always the same spring rate. So I'll go ahead and throw these in here. One thing I want to point out, you need to be very careful of the rear brake line. Very easy to damage that, lowering this rear end down. So my jack was actually all the way down, so I had to bump the lift up a tiny bit to get that spring out, get it over this little the hump. So it's just one thing to be careful of, is really pay attention to your brake lines, and probably when you get done, make sure you inspect those to make sure that you didn't cause any damage. All right, new springs are in there. I got the shock bolts back in. I just need to put some thread locker on there and go ahead and torque those down. So springs, the tighter coils are going on top. You want to be able to read the lettering on there, part number rather. I mean, this literally took me like 10 minutes to swap those out. So, I mean, I realize I'm on a lift here, but I've done these on the ground, jack stands and a jack. It's really easy. So the front is a little bit more tricky, but we're going to get to that next. I need to go ahead and bolt up the rear sway bar, and then I'm gonna probably go ahead and see if I can get that get those rear bump stops swapped out. So I hit them with some WD-40 real quick, and the only thing that worries me is they have looks like an Allen head bolt on them, which is kind of odd for a OEM fastener in my experience, but you know, Ford does weird things sometimes. So hopefully I can get those out without too much trouble, without stripping the head out, and then go ahead and change the bump stops too and get the rear end completely finished. So I'll go ahead and jump on that. All right, so I was mistaken. It's not an Allen head, it is a Torx head. I don't know if you can see it. This camera doesn't focus that close, but here we go. It's a, so what size is it? T40 Torx. So it's like the star head. So you're gonna need to grab some of those if you don't have it already to get those bump stops off. All right, first bump stop out. Wasn't too much trouble. WD-40 helped. So here they are. I went with the Ford Racing bump stops. I'm pretty sure there's Maximum Motorsports makes some, and I'm sure there's others. But here they are side by side. The old one was pretty rusty. I mean, just the whole point of replacing these is, from if I understand correctly, the new ones are basically a different diameter of rubber, so they are softer or possibly more progressive. I'm not sure exactly on that, but basically, since the car is going to be lower, it's more likely to hit the bump stops now. So with the old ones being, you know, relatively stiff, it's going to be a really harsh ride if it does happen to hit that bump stop, and then you're going to have like an abrupt jolt to the suspension. It could break tires loose or whatever. Whereas the new ones are going to give you kind of a more progressive hit. If you do happen to hit the bump stops, it's not going to upset the suspension as much. Because I mean, basically, when if you hit the bump stop, your spring rate is going to go infinite. You know, it'd be the same as having a piece of wood in there. It's not going to have any more give to it. So the new ones did come with new bolts, so I'm happy to see that. I don't have to reuse those old rusty bolts. Something I wanted to point out. Let me grab the light here first. So I know Vorschlag and Maximum Motorsports, they sell a relocation kit for the bump stop. You can see up here, right there. Hold on a second. Right here, this is where the bump stop hit. So it's already hitting with the stock springs in there. So lowering it 1.5 inches, it's definitely gonna hit again. But so Vorschlag, Maximum Motorsports, they sell a plate. It basically bolts to the axle here where the bump stop would bolt, and it moves the bump stop in toward the center of the car. It's hard to hold the light and talk and point at stuff. All right, that's a little bit better. So this little plate, it'll bolt here, and it moves the bump stop forward and then in. And what that does, if you look up here, so this is where the bump stop hit before, which is back here on this angled part, right? So when I move it forward, it's gonna actually hit up here. So it's gonna give you, maybe a 1/4 inch more clearance, right? So not a great deal, but every little bit counts. So I just wanted to point that out so you can understand what those plates are actually doing. All right, everything's bolted back up. Sway bar's bolted back up, springs are in, bump stops are on, shocks are bolted up and torqued. So the rear end is done. I'm gonna move ahead up to the front. All right, a guy on Instagram asked what the height of the total stack of 315s was. He wanted to compare it to his 305s. So what kind of YouTuber would I be if I did not get an answer for him? So I got one of my toe plates here on top, and I'm trying to do this one-handed, but let's see, where are we at? 49 3/4 inches, or 126.5 centimeters for you metric people. So there you go. Video's running long again, so I'm gonna break it up into 2 parts. Go ahead and click the link for part 2.